Welcome to Wealth Well Done. Together, we'll cover a wide range of important topics surrounding money and the impact it has on our lives. From the sophisticated and highly valuable planning techniques of the ultra-wealthy to the commonly underutilized biblical teachings. Together, we'll work to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well. Here's your host, Eric Scovill.
Welcome to the 38th episode of the Wealth Well Done podcast, where we lean into the tactical, practical, and spiritual advice to help you do your wealth well done. Before I get into the topic for today, I want to share a story with you that I experienced yesterday. My family and I were traveling home from a work conference in South Florida. We were at the airport. I had dropped them off to check in, and I knew there was a pretty long line to get through the check-in, and my wife had 3 kids with her and all the bags plus the 2 car seat bags, so she had a lot that she was carrying and dealing with, and I knew she had made the comment to me that we might not make our flight even though we were 2 hours there early, just seeing how long the line was. When I went to go park, there was a ton of traffic, and so it took me a long time just to go park the car literally quite across the street. And so by the time I finally did that, I knew we were going to be starting to get close to the pressure point of when it really needs to get through and we need to get in. And as I was walking I was at the Fort Lauderdale airport, as I was walking through the skywalk from the parking deck to the airport where you check in, as soon as I opened the doors, I saw something that seemed strange right off the bat. It was a white man in his probably mid to late 60s, and a young Asian girl, probably 5 to 8 years old. And they were holding hands. He was walking, they were just walking slowly. They weren't in any rush. And as they passed by me, and it was pretty quick, and didn't have long to study them, but as they passed by me, he was mentioning something about, hey, I'll give you $1 for this, is what I heard. And I just looked in her eyes, and she just had this very blank, submissive stare. She wasn't looking at him. She wasn't engaging. At first I thought, well, maybe it's a grandkid. And as it went on from there, they had already passed. I just stopped, and I was thinking, is this sex trafficking? Is this happening right here? We're at an airport in South Florida. Is this sex trafficking? And I'm carrying my bag plus the big infant car seat, knowing that my family needs me just on the just down the walkway here. And I immediately say, Holy Spirit, what do you want to do? Do I go after them? Do I try to stop them? What would I say? I have no idea. And I stop, and I try to listen. I say, what do we want to do? What do we want to do? And I don't hear anything. And that's not uncommon for me to ask the Holy Spirit for something and not hear some big audible voice saying, go tackle that guy. And so I stopped there and I listened, and they've by this point have already disappeared into the parking deck. And I don't hear anything. And so I kind of reluctantly walk toward where my family's at. I get to the other people I'm with, and I say, man, I don't know if I just witnessed someone going off into sex trafficking. And I was able to convince myself that it was fine, because I didn't, I asked the Holy Spirit, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go do something? But as I continued to reflect on it last night, and even then I prayed, like, if this is something, someone's doing something wrong here, have them have a car accident on the way out of the parking garage, so that way they get caught. But as I woke up this morning pondering this more, it really started to eat at me. I realized, wait a minute, that guy didn't have a bag. That girl was only had a backpack with her. I started to understand just how that submissive feeling in her eyes, and just realizing, like, these things just don't add up. And they don't add up to it wasn't a normal even forget the racial piece of this. It wasn't a normal grandparent to grandchild relationship, which is the only type of relationship that should have been with that guy holding a hand. And it really started to eat at me, obviously, that I probably let this kid go, and I should have absolutely gone after. And I was thinking about, why didn't I? Well, I didn't know what I would do. I'm not afraid of the guy. I could easily go beat a guy up. I could go tackle a 60-year-old. That's not a problem. But what would I have done? I was afraid of being rude. Point blank, I was afraid of being rude. And I should have gone over there with pulled out my phone and said, hey, do you guys mind if this is exactly what I was looking for, and pulled my phone and actually tried to take a picture of him. And I can lie and be awkward there, and then ask questions and see if the girl, is this your grandpa, and see what she says, and does she even speak English, and see how that guy reacts. Does that guy take off and run, or what happens from there? And so I should have been ready for something. The other thing I was thinking about is, what else kept me from acting? Just to go stop and ask the question. And the reality was, it was an inconvenience for me, and I was being self-centered. My family was waiting for me. We were trying to make our flight home. We wound up making our flight with plenty of time. Could I have spared a couple minutes to go and do that and maybe try to save a kid's life? You bet. What if we missed our flight? Who gives a crap? And so it's just like, how self-centered was I, and self-absorbed, that I wasn't even willing to be inconvenienced enough to go and just interject there. And so it's with an incredibly heavy heart that I'm sharing this, but there's an episode that I want to replay. And so back, I think it was episode 16, we interviewed Chuck Day. Chuck Day is from the International Justice Mission. They do incredible work in fighting human trafficking, slavery, especially in the sex trafficking area. And so I want to replay that episode where he gets into this. It's graphic, your discretion advised. But I just think it's so important that not only do you hear this and know what's going on, but also you are just think this through enough ahead of time that you know how you would react if you saw something. Because I thought in my head, well, if it was that, if they were flying here, then surely someone else would have done something. Someone else has already checked this, but maybe not. Maybe other people were too cowardly or too self-absorbed as well to do anything. So anyways, have some type of mental plan of what you would do if you saw something that looked like potentially that. How do you do it? And don't be afraid to be rude or to offend someone. That's what I was. I was afraid to be rude and offensive. I noticed you're of a different race than this girl here. Therefore, let me see what you're doing. I didn't want to do that. So therefore, who knows what's happened since then. So I have certainly been repenting and asking for forgiveness there. But I want to encourage you to be intentional with how you would ever handle yourself if you saw a situation like that. And I hope that this message from Chuck inspires you to get involved here as you come toward the end of the year in terms of giving that people do, or just as you're looking at resolutions for next year. Get involved. This is a very serious deal that's happening all around the world. That girl was the age of my oldest daughter. It just kills me to think that could have happened to her. So, I hope this is moving to you. And again, sorry for the somberness of this, but this is deep and it's important.
Last week we had Chuck Day on as he went into a number of different things around the mentality and the philosophy of donors and how they use very intentional strategy to set this up not only for themselves and their partnerships, but also then for the future generations. Today, I am excited. Chuck's back, so I'm excited about that. But I'm very excited to do a deep dive into the organization that Chuck works for, International Justice Mission. Background on Chuck. Chuck has he gave his bio last time saying he's a recovering lawyer. But Chuck has spent the last 25 plus years inside philanthropy with organizations that are both domestically here and abroad, Opportunity International, Fuller Foundation, and what was the other one you did, Planned Giving at Wheaton College. And now last 8 years have been with IJM as the director of Planned Giving. So Chuck, will you no, we're just gonna jump right into this here. Actually, first, why don't you hit just briefly on what is planned giving? Can you hit on that first, and then we'll go after IJM?
Yeah. So planned giving, as the name kind of suggests, is for folks who want to be generous, who want to be philanthropic, and want to be a little bit more sophisticated and deliberate than pulling out their checkbook and writing a check. Because there are significant tax advantages and financial advantages to giving things like appreciated stock and appreciated real estate, giving IRA assets and things like that. So my role is to sit down with a family who wants to be really, really wise stewards of their giving and show them, based upon what they own and what their goals are, both philanthropically and financially, what is the best way for them to give, what's the best asset to give, what is the best time to give it, what is the best arrangement to put it in so that it benefits the charity that they want to support and benefits the family in the best possible way.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, sir. Okay. Into the meat.
Yeah.
First of all, what is IJM? What is their mission?
Yeah. So International Justice Mission is a nonprofit human rights organization headquartered in Washington, D.C. We were founded in 1997. So we are coming up on 25 years as an organization. Our mission broadly is to protect the world's poor people from violent crime. Mm. And it may seem almost counterintuitive, but poor people are actually by far the largest victims of violent crime of any group in the world. And we'll get into the reason for that in a few minutes. But IJM combats violent crime against the poor all over the world in varying types. The thing that we are most known for and the thing that we focus much of our work on is in the area of human trafficking and human slavery, which, in all honesty, I don't think I even knew existed until a couple of years before I went to work for IJM. Yeah. And I'm not sure if many of your listeners are aware of not only the problem, but the massive extent of that problem right now.
Probably not, and I hope to cover that here. I think a lot of people first got exposed to it just with the movie Taken. Yeah. When that came out, that hit mainstream media in a way that all of a sudden people were aware that this was a real problem. Yeah. But not to the extent no one had any idea. And I still don't think anyone here has much of a concept of just how invasive that is. Yeah. All right. So yeah, we will come back to that. Will you hit on the reason that IJM got started 25 years ago? Yeah.
Our founder and CEO is a gentleman named Gary Haugen. And Gary is a brilliant lawyer and has a fabulous, compassionate heart. And Gary was working for the Department of Justice back in the 90s when the Rwandan genocide broke out. And, some of your listeners may recall that in the nation of Rwanda in Africa, over the course of about 6 weeks, warfare broke out where about 800,000 people were basically hacked to death by machetes within a reasonably short 4 to 6 week period. And the world stood by and did nothing. And after the genocide had finally stopped, the United Nations finally stepped in and said, we need to do something about this. We need to hold the perpetrators accountable. So they selected Gary to lead up the group, the war crimes group, that was going to go in to Rwanda and assess the crimes and then find out who was responsible for this and hold them accountable. These were the first war crimes that had been held since the end of World War II. And what Gary discovered when he went over there is that by far the largest victims of this genocide were the poor. And I think his biggest takeaway was that we do a lot of things to try to help the poor. We provide education and healthcare and mosquito nets and microloans and all these things to try to help the poor. But what these people needed was somebody to stop the machetes. And there was not a single organization on the planet at that point in time that was dedicated to stopping violent crime against the poor. And so Gary decided to start IJM, and now we are the largest anti-human trafficking violence protection organization for the poor in the world.
Okay. It is unfathomable to think about 800,000 people being killed by machetes, which is not a fast process, and no one did anything.
Yep.
So, okay.
Not the world's best moment.
No. So when you and I first had this discussion, we were downtown Peoria here, within 2 miles, 1 mile of one of the poorer zip codes in the country. Mm-hmm. And we talked about this whole idea. We talked about the way affluence affects protection. Yep. And so I don't hold myself in any high regard here, but we just talked about, like, if something happened to me, if I went missing, people are going to take note. People in the community are going to, there's going to be a reaction, right? And from the police and media and other things like that. But if someone who matters just as much to God as I do, a mile or two down the road goes missing, it happens often, and people don't like it. It doesn't make the news. People don't pay attention. Not that people don't care about them, but it's just, why is that? Well, I think we kind of know why that is, but can you just elaborate on that of how severe that problem is? And maybe not even in America, because in America we have ways to amplify our voice as well. But I think in other countries, it's like, that's just a completely different situation altogether.
Yeah. When you and I were in high school, we were taught that slavery ended at the Civil War.
Right.
And I guess that was part true in the sense that the plantation style of slavery that was, prevalent in the United States at the time of the Civil War certainly did come to an end. But like most forms of evil, slavery didn't end. Slavery just changed shape and evolved into what we now call modern day slavery, which is sex trafficking and labor trafficking, which now is affecting more people than any other time in human history. There are approximately 7 billion people on planet Earth. And 2 billion of those people, which would include you and me and most of the Western developed world, we have what's called the protection of the law. If something happens to us, if we're the victim of a crime and we dial 911 or we call the police, somebody's going to show up. Police are going to show up. They're going to gather evidence. They're going to do their best to make an arrest. A prosecutor is going to take the case and present it to a judge. And law enforcement and the legal system is going to, perhaps imperfectly, but it's going to work on our behalf. But that's only 2 billion of the 7 billion people on this planet. The other 5 billion people live outside of the protection of the law, meaning if they are beaten, raped, robbed, or enslaved, no one is going to come to protect them. Nobody is going to come to investigate the crime. No police, no prosecutor, no judge. No one is going to protect that person from violent crime. And what's horrible is that not only do those 5 billion people know that, the people who perpetrate crime against them also know that.
Right.
And so the crimes just keep coming because there is no one to deter the criminal from doing one more crime.
Okay. All right. What is the scale of human trafficking today?
By the most recent count, there are 50 million people enslaved around the world right now. That is far more than the entire transatlantic slave trade during the 1600s and 1700s. It is more, as I mentioned, than any other time in human history. 99% of that slavery is outside of the United States, consisting of both sex trafficking and labor trafficking, which is, I think most Americans understand what sex trafficking is from movies and headlines. Labor trafficking is perhaps even more prevalent and far more widespread through Asia, Africa, and Latin America than it is here in the United States. The pandemic had a horrific effect on human trafficking. The war in the Ukraine has sent hundreds of thousands of refugees to be potential victims of trafficking. And so, unfortunately, within the last few years, the number of people who have been subjected to human trafficking has increased, despite everyone's best efforts to stop it.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, not the world's finest moment here when you look at that. I know there was a book that I read a while back on the ruthless elimination of hurry, in which case the author goes into, he hits a little bit of that, with all the clothes that people buy, they don't realize how much of their clothing and other items that they buy come from that. It's not just kind of Western material products. There's the brick factories and other things like that too. I know you shared some stories of what happens to people when they try to escape, try to escape the labor. You mentioned, someone tried to escape and they cut off both their hands.
Yep.
Like it's just the things that are horrific that we can't, that in mainstream modern America, we can't comprehend that these things are actually happening.
Yeah.
Most of us can't comprehend what's going on in the sex trade.
Right. If you look at the two different components of human trafficking, sex trafficking is now a $150 billion a year business. It is in the United States. It is extremely prevalent in the developing world. And it's important to understand that by and large, the vast majority of these kids are not sold by their parents. This is not a situation where parents knowingly sold their children into the sex trade. Far more common is a situation where an extremely poor family is approached by a representative, maybe somebody that's even connected to them through friends or family. And they will come to this extremely poor father who has 6 or 7 children to feed and say that they represent a wealthy family several hundred miles away that needs a nanny for their young children. And that they are interested in hiring this man's 14-year-old daughter or 13-year-old daughter to travel across several hundred miles and serve as the nanny for this wealthy family. The family promises the dad that this daughter is going to be educated and well-fed and well taken care of. And to the dad, this sounds like the greatest thing that's ever happened. His daughter will be well provided for. He's more able to take care of his other children. And, effectively, he is duped into sending his daughter into a situation in which she is obviously never going to serve as a nanny for any family.
Right.
She's going to be immediately brought into sex trafficking. And until somebody rescues her, she's going to remain in that situation of just horrific abuse.
Until she dies.
We see this all over the world, Asia, Africa, Latin America. The only circumstance in which we ever see relatives knowingly engaging their children in sex trafficking is a new form of trafficking, which basically occurs online. And the situation in this case is the perpetrator gets on his computer and through one of the streaming services goes to a website, a webcam that's been set up over primarily in the Philippines. And at the other end of the webcam a child has been positioned in front of the webcam and the perpetrator types into their computer the sex acts that they want this child to perform in front of the webcam. This is called the online sexual exploitation of children, or OSEC. It is the crime that IJM is highly focused on resolving before it spreads to other parts of the world.
Okay.
And we're engaging both the United States and other governments into trying to stop the crime. But it is the one crime in which we see an aunt or a parent, always extremely poor, that is directly involved in the trafficking of the child.
No. Oh, okay. Can you go ahead? Did you have something you wanted?
I apologize if that was difficult for your listeners. That is how horrific sex trafficking is. It involves children as young as under 2. It is highly profitable for the perpetrators who engage in it, and it will continue to fester until organizations like IJM are large enough and well enough established to take them down.
Yeah. Well, I think it's worth us being knocked off our comfortable pedestal, and so I appreciate you smacking us right between the eyes with it. Okay, let's transition to what is IJM doing about this? Yeah. So we've talked before, like IJM actually they've got a model that works. Like you guys are seeing this work. So what is IJM doing to whether you want to go after this new thing in the Philippines, or if you want to go after just the other model that you guys have seen work in different areas around the globe? Well, how does IJM combat this type of violent crime against the poor?
So over the years, we've developed a methodology that we are seeing exceptional levels of success in decreasing the prevalence of crime against poor people. We started off our work in Cambodia in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And I think our goal at that point in time was to see, could we rescue one girl? Could we get one underage girl out of the brothels in Cambodia at a time in which Cambodia was basically the pedophile capital of the world? A pedophile could fly into Cambodia, and within 3 minutes of leaving the airport, they could buy a kid off the streets. It was a horrific situation. The prevalence of the crime, even in countries in which prostitution is legal, minors are never legally allowed in the sex industry. And so our goal was to see if we could actually do something to rescue at least one girl, one underage girl from sex trafficking. And this became the model for what we were later able to accomplish all across the world against multiple different crimes. We go into the country, we establish a physical presence, and we hire 3 local groups of people, all indigenous to their country. We hire undercover agents, we hire social workers, and we hire lawyers. The undercover agents go into the crime areas with a camera and undercover microphone, and they actually will go into the brothel where the minors are being held, or they'll go into the brick factory where the slave laborers are being held, and they will gather all the evidence of the crime that's being perpetrated. And we will then take that evidence to the local police, who we have spent months and years investing in, training, working with, collaborating with, determining which ones are corrupt and which ones are not. We take that evidence to the police, and in conjunction with them, not on our own, but in conjunction with the local police, we go in and we do a rescue. And we rescue that girl from the brothel, or we rescue 500 people from a brick factory. But the idea is that we are engaging local law enforcement, which up till now has had little or no interest in protecting the poor, and showing them that this is part of their job, and it's an important part of their job. So they get the credit for the arrest. They get the headlines in the newspaper and on the 11 o'clock news that night. And we want them to get that affirmation and that credit.
Yeah.
We then take the victims, which we call survivors, and we hand them over to our social workers. And we've created a state-of-the-art program called Aftercare, which is specifically designed to help people who have been subject to horrific abuse, psychological, emotional, physical, even vocational work. And it takes 2 years generally for a victim of trafficking to emerge where they can healthfully re-engage society. And then our lawyers take over and they take the evidence that we've gotten with the police, and we take that case all the way through the criminal justice system, through the evidence gathering, through the courtroom work, to the point in which a judge actually sentences the perpetrator to prison. And what we found is that you don't have to arrest all the bad guys.
Right.
You just have to arrest enough of the bad guys that the other ones realize that the impunity, the freedom that they've been enjoying for years to take out this crime no longer exists. And if they continue to do this crime, they're going to end up in prison like these guys just did. And so what we find is that if we arrest a certain number of people, the other ones will run and they'll get out of the business and they'll go do something else, hopefully something legal. But you don't have to arrest everyone. You just have to arrest enough so that the other ones realize that the game is up.
How long does it take to execute a plan like that?
We have found through the measurement process that we go through that we can achieve 70, 80% reduction in the crime within 5 years.
Wow. Okay. And how long do you stay in an area?
We stay until we win. And we measure winning is when the local police and the prosecutors and the judges are now doing exactly what they need to do, which is provide protection for their own poor people.
Okay.
So in the beginning, we're doing all the heavy lifting. By the end, we're merely monitoring and supervising. And when we reach that point, we can get up and go, and we can go to another area of the world that needs our help. But we win when law enforcement is actually taking over and providing protection for their own people.
Okay. I'm looking at some of the numbers that you sent me when I asked, what's it cost per area to do something like this? Because I imagine there are people who would want to just give, and I'll give you enough to help you go fund an entire area to do this work. Can you just so it's coming out of your mouth, can you give a little bit of example of like what it might take for an office or for a region to do this, whether it's Cambodia or one of these other regions where you guys have had success? What type of cost are we talking about to execute that type of plan?
Yeah. So IJM currently has field offices where we actually do the anti-human trafficking work all across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, where the crime is most prevalent. We're currently working in 16 different countries. We have 27 different field offices. We are looking to almost double that by the year 2030. And our goal, by 2030, we will be protecting 500 million people.
Wow.
From violent crime. People who have never been protected before will be able to live safely and to do the things that you and I take for granted.
Right.
So by 2030, we are going to take the methodology, the programming that we found so successful, and we're basically going to scale it worldwide. The cost of doing our work varies depending on where we're working and whether we are in a brand new startup operation or a program that's been in existence for 10 or 15 years. For example, if somebody wants to finance a rescue, which basically pays for the cost of our undercover people from going in and gathering the evidence and engaging with the police and planning the rescue and arresting the perpetrators, the cost of that is generally $7,000. And we have people who send us $7,000 a month or $7,000 a quarter, or they may do it, one time, because they know that $7,000 is going to remove somebody who is in a horrible position of peril and get them out.
Okay.
For people who look at our work and say, how can I help you start an office in a new place, or how can I cover the cost of one of your existing programs? That can be, more into the 6-figure and 7-figure area. But for people who are looking for impact, for people who are looking to maximize, their giving, we have found in 9 different programs that we've done around the world, before we start the program, we have an objective third-party organization come in and measure the prevalence of crime. Whatever crime we're trying to affect, whether it's Asia, Africa, or Latin America, and we do a prevalence study. And typically the problem is horrific. In areas of India, 1 out of every 3 workers is a slave. In areas of the Philippines and in other parts of Asia, child trafficking is off the charts. And so we will go in and we will do our program, and then we will do that for several years, and we will have the same organization come back and measure, did the prevalence of crime actually drop because of what IJM did? And in those 9 programs, in each single one of those cases, the prevalence of crime dropped by anywhere from 50 to 86% during the time that we worked there.
Praise God. That's amazing. Okay. Can you talk to me a little bit about the rehab, your aftercare program? Because obviously someone can't go from being sex trafficked for however long it's been, whether they've done it for a day. We know if someone gets raped, that might be a lifetime of problems that are created from that. Yep. So when someone goes into a sex trafficking situation, especially if it's over some longer period of time, they don't get rescued and then say, "Great, thanks," and go on their way. They're not going to. They can't step back into normal life. So how do you guys do your aftercare program? What does that entail?
Yeah, I think this is the area of our work that we understood the least when we started, and have come to appreciate the most since we've done it.
I bet.
Consider that this was a bunch of lawyers starting this organization and who had the dream of primarily focusing on the perpetrators and getting them off the streets. And you do a rescue, and now you've got an 11-year-old girl who can't be returned to her parents because they're not capable of providing the needs that she has now. And Eric, as you mentioned, she has been through horrific abuse.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's usually 3 years or more that these kids are being trafficked before we're able to rescue them. So we've got to undo 3 years of trauma that you and I can't even begin to wrap our minds around.
Right, because these girls are raped all day long.
This is serial rape.
Yeah.
And it is horrific. And so we engage some of the best social workers in the world who have worked in the whole area of trauma-induced therapy. And they developed a state-of-the-art program of aftercare in which we will place this child in a residential facility. Typically, we don't own that facility, but it's in the area in which they do have some form of support in terms of family. But it's a residential facility typically owned maybe by the Catholic Church or some other organization where this facility has been specifically set up to provide aftercare for people, typically young people, who have been through this form of abuse. As I mentioned earlier, this whole program is built around physical, emotional, and psychological rehabilitation. We even provide vocational training so that when they leave the facility if they're older than 18, they can actually go out and support themselves sustainably. Because the last thing in the world we want is for any of them to go back into the situation that they were rescued from.
Right.
And we have phenomenal levels of success with our aftercare program. We have provided that program to organizations here in the U.S. that are trying to provide that same type of aftercare for kids who are rescued from sex trafficking here in the U.S. So we provide that program to any entity that wants it. It has been refined and improved over the years, and it is uniquely suited for the victims of sex trafficking and labor trafficking crimes.
Okay. I know we've talked about this. I mean, you don't rehab from this without this is a supernatural work. This is the love of Jesus that comes into someone's life that lets them know that they're enough and that they've been loved through the darkest hours, and that's the only way that someone's going to come out of this. So I am so grateful for the work that you guys are doing, and thank you for sharing this. If someone were to donate, so I typically suggest, and maybe I need to change this. I typically suggest when someone's donating to an organization that they look at it as a 3-year partnership. Mm-hmm. And maybe for some charities that makes sense. For IJM, it sounds like probably at least 5 years, if not a little bit longer, that they come in. Last week we talked about the sustainability of a partnership there. When someone's giving, it may, for those, if someone's giving a substantial gift, what mm-hmm. type of involvement updates would they maybe expect to have with IJM?
Yeah. For your listeners who this is all brand new information, and they feel like, God is tugging on their heart that this is something that they want to get involved in, I would take this very systematically. I would go on to our website and learn as much as you can about what we do. IJM has local representatives all over the country that you can sit down with over a cup of coffee and go deep on the issues that you want to learn more about in the particular areas that you feel like you want to address. And I would then very prayerfully and very thoughtfully decide, how do you want to do year one?
Okay.
Because if this is something that's brand new, unless there's some other area of involvement where you have some context for understanding the work that's being done, I would look at year one and say, what do I want to accomplish? What kind of feedback, what kind of information am I going to get back in terms of what my contribution has done? And then after the first year, sit down and decide, what do I want year two to look like?
Yeah.
For many people, this is brand new. And, obviously from an organization that exists on private donations, we would love for people to dive in deep and be very, very generous, because that's going to have great impact for our organization. But we also want people to be with us for the long haul. We want this to be a sustainable partnership. We want people to get great joy and great fulfillment out of supporting this work. That justice would be one of their buckets of generosity that they would support every single year. And so going low and slow on this, particularly in the first year or two, is a really good strategy to go with. If you want to get involved at a substantial level, for folks who give $10,000 a year or more, we have, as I mentioned, regional people all over the country who will meet with them, give them updates on what we do. We provide email updates to everybody who supports our work. But for the people who really want to engage another person and ask questions and find out the impact of their giving, that would be the level that I would suggest that people get involved with.
Okay.
It's also pretty close to the cost of what it costs to support a rescue.
Right.
And the other thing is that we take trips to the field. We take trips every year where people can go along and they can travel to Cambodia or India or the Philippines or Guatemala, and nothing is going to give them greater insight and context as to what the problem and the solutions are than going on one of those trips. And I encourage parents to take their kids who are old enough to appreciate it and understand it to go on those trips because nothing tenderizes the heart of a teenager more than seeing how the rest of the world lives.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Chuck, we're gonna stop it there. I am so grateful for the work that you're doing, the work that IJM is doing. Thank you for being on here and educating our listeners of this as well. If someone wants to reach out to you or to the organization, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you guys?
Absolutely. You can reach me by email at cday@ijm.org. You can also contact me through the website. But Eric, thanks again for having me. Feel free to bring me back anytime you like.
Okay.
And I appreciate your work.
Okay. Thank you. All right, everybody. We will see you next week.
Thank you again for listening to Wealth Well Done. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player, and together we'll continue to improve our relationship with money and our effectiveness in stewarding it well.